The morning started like any other ordinary Saturday in our quiet suburban neighborhood, with the gentle hum of lawnmowers and the distant chatter of children playing in their yards. I had planned to spend the day organizing my garage, a task I'd been putting off for weeks when what should have been a simple, mundane activity turned into an absolute nightmare thanks to my neighbor Karen, who served as the self-appointed enforcer of our homeowners association rules. Karen had always been the type of person who seemed to find genuine pleasure in monitoring every single activity that occurred within a 3-block radius of her pristine colonial-style home, complete with her perfectly manicured lawn that she treated like a sacred shrine, and her collection of seasonal decorations that she rotated with military precision. As I pressed the garage door opener and watched the heavy metal door slowly roll upward, revealing the cluttered interior of my garage filled with boxes, old furniture, and various tools scattered across my workbench, I noticed Karen standing in her driveway with her arms crossed, wearing her signature disapproving expression that had become as familiar to me as the sunrise. What I didn't anticipate was that she would immediately begin marching toward my property with the determined stride of someone who believed they had just witnessed a heinous crime in progress, her phone already pressed against her ear as she began speaking in urgent, dramatic tones to whoever was unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of her call. The situation escalated rapidly when I realized that Karen wasn't just making a casual phone call to complain to another neighbor or family member about my apparent transgression of opening my own garage door, but had actually dialed 911 to report what she genuinely believed was a crime in progress. I could hear fragments of her conversation as she gestured wildly in my direction, describing to the emergency dispatcher how she was witnessing someone breaking into a garage in broad daylight, completely ignoring the obvious fact that I was standing in my own driveway, wearing casual weekend clothes, and clearly belonged on the property she was claiming I was burglarizing. The absurdity of the situation became even more apparent when Karen began shouting across the street, her voice carrying that particular shrill quality that seemed reserved for her most dramatic accusations, demanding to know what I thought I was doing with her car. Initially, I was completely bewildered by this accusation, as I couldn't see any vehicle that could possibly belong to Karen anywhere near my garage, and I began to wonder if she was experiencing some sort of medical episode or psychological break that was causing her to see things that weren't actually there. As I looked around my garage more carefully, trying to understand what could possibly have triggered such an extreme reaction from Karen, my eyes fell upon my newly purchased sedan that I had parked inside the garage the previous evening after picking it up from the dealership. The car was a beautiful midnight blue color, still bearing the temporary paper license plates that indicated its recent purchase, and it was positioned exactly where I had left it after carefully maneuvering it into the tight space between my workbench and the wall where I stored my bicycle. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt when I understood that Karen was claiming ownership of my brand new car, apparently operating under the delusion that I had somehow stolen a vehicle that belonged to her and hidden it in my garage overnight. This accusation was not only completely false but also utterly ridiculous, considering that Karen drove a bright red SUV that was at least 10 years old and bore absolutely no resemblance to my sleek new sedan in terms of color, size, make, model, or any other conceivable characteristic. When the police officers arrived approximately 15 minutes later, their patrol car pulling up to the curb with lights flashing, but thankfully no siren wailing, I watched as Karen rushed toward them, with the enthusiasm of someone who believed she was about to be vindicated for her vigilant neighborhood watch efforts. She began speaking rapidly to the officers, gesturing dramatically toward my garage and pointing at me as if I were a dangerous criminal who had been caught red-handed in the middle of committing a serious felony. The two officers, both of whom appeared to be seasoned veterans who had probably encountered their fair share of neighborhood disputes and false alarms, listened patiently to Karen's breathless account of the alleged theft, while occasionally glancing in my direction with expressions that seemed to convey a mixture of professional skepticism and barely concealed amusement. One officer was tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair at his temples, while his partner was younger and more compact, both wearing expressions of weary patience that suggested they had dealt with similar situations before. As Karen continued her animated explanation of how she had witnessed me breaking into the garage and stealing her car, the officers began asking logical questions that gradually revealed the numerous holes in her story. When they asked her to describe her missing vehicle, Karen became noticeably flustered and began providing contradictory details, first claiming it was blue, then correcting herself to say it was dark blue, then adding that it might have been black, before finally admitting that she wasn't entirely certain of the exact color, but was absolutely sure it was hers. The situation became even more embarrassing for Karen when the officers asked her to provide basic information about her allegedly stolen vehicle, such as the license plate number, vehicle identification number, or even the make and model. She was unable to provide any of these crucial details, instead insisting that she would recognize her own car when she saw it and demanding that the officers force me to move the vehicle out of my garage so she could properly identify it as her property. Meanwhile, I calmly retrieved my wallet from my back pocket and produced my driver's license, vehicle registration, insurance documentation, and the sales paperwork from the dealership, all of which clearly established my ownership of the sedan and my legal right to park it in my own garage. The officers examined these documents carefully, taking note of the matching names and addresses, while Karen stood nearby growing increasingly agitated as she realized that her dramatic accusations were rapidly falling apart under the weight of actual evidence and logical scrutiny. When the officers asked Karen to produce any documentation proving her ownership of the vehicle in question, she became defensive and began claiming that her paperwork was inside her house, then changed her story to suggest that the documents were in her other car, before finally admitting that she couldn't locate the proper paperwork but insisted that the police should simply take her word for it based on her status as a longtime resident of the neighborhood and her position within the homeowners association. The younger officer then asked Karen to describe the last time she had seen her allegedly stolen vehicle, and her response revealed the fundamental flaw in her entire accusation. She claimed that she had last seen the car parked in the dealership lot where she had been shopping for a new vehicle just 2 days earlier, and she was certain that someone from the neighborhood had followed her there, stolen the car she had been considering purchasing, and hidden it in their garage to avoid detection. This explanation made absolutely no sense on multiple levels, as it suggested that I had somehow known which car Karen was interested in buying, had managed to purchase it before she could complete her own transaction, and had then brought it home and parked it in my garage as part of some elaborate scheme to deprive her of her desired vehicle. The officers exchanged glances that clearly conveyed their assessment of Karen's mental state and the validity of her complaints, while I stood quietly nearby, still somewhat stunned by the surreal nature of the entire situation. As the investigation continued, Karen's behavior became increasingly erratic and her accusations more outlandish, leading her to claim that I was part of a larger conspiracy involving multiple neighbors who were working together to steal cars and hide them in various garages throughout the subdivision. She insisted that the homeowners association should conduct a comprehensive search of every garage in the neighborhood to uncover this alleged criminal enterprise, and she threatened to file complaints with the police department, the mayor's office, and various other authorities if her concerns weren't taken seriously. The situation reached its peak when Karen began screaming at the top of her lungs accusing me of being a master car thief who had somehow managed to forge all of my ownership documents and bribe the dealership employees to provide false information to support my cover story. Her voice echoed throughout the neighborhood, drawing curious onlookers from their homes and creating a spectacle that was both embarrassing and completely unnecessary, all because she had convinced herself that my legitimate purchase of a new vehicle was somehow connected to her own failed attempt to buy a similar car. Eventually, the officers concluded their investigation by politely but firmly explaining to Karen that no crime had been committed, that I was clearly the legal owner of the vehicle in question, and that filing false police reports was itself a crime that could result in serious legal consequences. They advised her to be more careful about making accusations without proper evidence and suggested that she might want to reconsider her approach to neighborhood.